It was a sunny morning in Greenfield, and John Anderson, a respected businessman, was preparing for a day that promised to be decisive for his business. He adjusted his tie in front of the mirror in his office, where the walls were adorned with awards and certificates that attested to his achievements. However, behind that facade of success, John carried a deep restlessness. The city, vibrant and full of life, was also a reflection of the divisions that permeated it. He thought about how people from different backgrounds were treated unequally, and how prejudices, often subtle, still infiltrated everyday interaction. Meanwhile, at the central bank, Emily Roberts, a young teller, was in the middle of a conversation with her coworkers. Her eyes sparkled as she spoke, but her words revealed a darker side of her beliefs. "Did you see that customer who came in yesterday? The way he dresses, you can't trust him," he said, with a snobbishness that did not go unnoticed. The other tellers laughed, nodding in agreement, reinforcing a culture of disdain that permeated the environment. "Yeah, seems like he doesn't know how to behave in a place like this," added one of her colleagues, unaware that those words were a reflection of a mentality that urgently needed to be confronted. John, on the other hand, was heading to the bank with an optimistic air. He was about to make a significant deposit that could propel his company to a new level. As he walked through the streets of Greenfield, he observed the people, each with their own stories and challenges. He remembered how he had fought to get where he was, facing suspicious looks and malicious comments along the way. Now, however, he felt confident and ready to show that his hard work was worth it. As he entered the central bank, the aroma of fresh coffee and the sound of the teller's keyboards greeted him. John felt welcomed, but his sense of comfort quickly dissipated. When he approached the counter and greeted Emily with a smile, he noticed the instant change in her expression. Her look, which should have been neutral, was filled with distrust. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Emily asked, her voice formal and distant. "Yes, I'm here to make a deposit," John replied, trying to keep the conversation light. But his response was met with a cutting silence. Emily, without hesitation, began asking questions about the origin of the money, demanding additional documents that were not usually required. "Sorry, but I'm going to need more proof that this deposit is legitimate." "How could you get this money?" she said, coldness in her voice palpable. Those words cut John like a blade. He felt his face. "I have been a customer here for years," he tried to explain, but his voice seemed to echo in an empty space. He noticed that some customers around him started to look, and the friendly atmosphere that once existed in the bank had become oppressive. Emily, still with a look of distrust, ignored John's attempt to introduce himself. "But you need to understand that we have to follow procedures," she insisted, not realizing the disdain her words carried. The environment became increasingly tense, and John felt as if he were being exposed, not just as a businessman, but as someone carrying the weight of unfair stereotypes. He looked around, feeling the heavy gazes of other customers, and humiliation began to set in. What should have been a routine business moment was turning into a scene of covert discrimination. "This isn't right," John thought, as he tried to gather the strength to respond. The feeling of powerlessness was overwhelming, and he wondered how far prejudice could go in his hometown, place where he had always believed that meritocracy prevailed. Michael, the central bank manager, was busy organizing documents at his desk when a growing murmur caught his attention. He looked up, and upon glancing at the lobby, noticed the tense expressions on the customers' faces and the defensive posture of his teller, Emily. A sense of discomfort began to form in his stomach. Without wasting time, he approached the counter, where the situation seemed to be intensifying. "Emily, can we talk for a minute?" Michael called, gesturing for her to follow him to a more private area. The look on John's face, who had been standing still, visibly shaken, made Michael feel a pang in his heart. He didn't know what had happened, but the tension in the air was palpable. As soon as they stepped away from the counter, Michael turned to Emily. "What's going on here? You seem to be having a difficult time with the customer." Emily crossed her arms, her defensive gaze dropping to the floor. "It's just that he didn't bring the documents I asked for. He doesn't seem trustworthy, and I can't just accept what he says." "Doesn't seem trustworthy?" Michael repeated, his voice rising a bit more than he intended. Are you saying that because of his appearance? Emily hesitated. Pride kept her from responding. Michael took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Emily, that's a prejudiced attitude. We cannot let our assumptions about people lead us to treat others disrespectfully. You need to understand that everyone has a story, and every customer deserves to be treated with dignity. Meanwhile, John stood there, watching the conversation. He could hear the voices but couldn't make out the words. He felt like an intruder in a place that The looks from the other customers seemed heavy, and he wondered if the disdain he felt was real or just a projection of his own humiliation. Finally, Michael turned to John with a look of sincerity. John, I'm very sorry about this. This is not what the central bank stands for. I promise we will take measures to ensure this doesn't happen again. Thank you. But that doesn't change what happened, John replied, his voice trembling a bit. I came here to make a deposit, not to go through this. I understand, and you have every right to feel that way. Please, allow me to correct that. We'll review your documents and do what's needed. I want you to feel comfortable here. Michael turned to Emily again. We need to have a serious conversation about how we treat our customers. Respect is fundamental, and that's something we need to cultivate every day. Emily's expression was beginning to change. She seemed to remember moments when she had also been judged. Cruel. I'm sorry, John. I didn't want this to happen, she murmured, a bit ashamed but still resistant. Apologies are a start, Emily, but we need to go further. Michael intervened firmly. Inclusion and respect aren't just words, they're principles we must live by every day. John, still feeling the tension of the situation, looked at Emily. He didn't want her to be fired, but he felt it was necessary for there to be consequences. I'm not here to ask for your dismissal, Emily, but it's important that you understand your actions have consequences. Michael nodded, realizing the situation required a more delicate approach. John, what do you think would be fair? What do you expect us to do next? John hesitated for a moment, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. I think we all need to learn from this. Not just you and me, but everyone who comes into this bank. Respect should be the foundation of any interaction. Michael reflected on John's words. He knew the situation required a deeper intervention, something that could transform the bank's culture significantly. You're right. Let's work together to create an environment that promotes inclusion and respect. And that starts now. The morning sun illuminated the windows of the central bank, reflecting a new beginning that was unfolding in the city of Greenfield. The air was filled with anticipation, as Michael, the manager, called a special meeting to kick off a diversity and inclusion training program. He firmly believed this was the key, not only to transforming the institution, but also to the cultural change needed in the community. The echo of John Anderson's footsteps resonated in the hallway as he headed to the conference room. When he entered, he saw his past experiences being discussed on the screen, accompanied by graphs and data revealing the prevalence of prejudice. Michael was standing with a serious look, and when he noticed John, he smiled warmly. John, it's a pleasure to have you here. Your story is crucial for us, he said, gesturing to the audience. The room was full of employees, some with curious expressions, others visibly uncomfortable. Let's start with some reflection. Michael continued, looking around at everyone. Today we have the opportunity to hear directly from John. He will share his experience and how this situation impacted his life. It's essential that you understand the weight of words and actions. John felt a chill in his stomach. Looking at the attentive faces in front of him, he decided it was time to tell his truth. He stood up, took a deep breath, and began. Hello everyone. My name is John Anderson, and I'm a businessman here in Greenfield. Recently, I went through a humiliating experience at the bank that made me rethink not just my position in society, but also the culture we often perpetuate without realizing. Faces began to light up, and he noticed some people were shifting in their seats, listening to every word intently. I was treated in a way that didn't reflect who I truly am. The way I was judged based on my appearance left me not just frustrated, but also sad. I am an active member of the community and contribute to its growth. I believe we all need to strive to see beyond appearances." People started murmuring among themselves, and an employee named Sarah raised her hand. "John, could you tell us how you felt at that moment? What was going through your mind while you were being treated that way?" "Of course, Sarah. At that moment, I felt my dignity was being stripped away. It was like I was exposed in a room full of people, being judged not by my ability, but by my image. Feeling of helplessness was overwhelming," John replied, his voice heavy with emotion. Michael intervened. "And that's something we all need to reflect on. Each of us has a role in creating an environment where people feel valued and respected. It's not just about policies, but about empathy and understanding. We need to question our own biases." Conversation intensified, and John began to notice that many employees were opening up, sharing their own experiences and unconscious biases. It was a moment of vulnerability and learning. He realized that change wouldn't come just from the top down, from a collective effort. After the session, as the employees dispersed, Michael, "Let's make sure this isn't just a conversation, but a real commitment to diversity and inclusion," he said, with a determined gleam in his eyes. "I hope we can make a difference, Michael. It's not just about us, but about everyone living in Greenfield. We need to fight against prejudice together," John replied, feeling more empowered. As they left the room, John looked out the window and saw the city pulsating with life. He realized that despite the challenges he had faced, there was a new hope in the air. The journey towards transformation was just beginning, and he was determined to be part of it, not just for himself, but for everyone still struggling with the same stigmas. It was a new beginning, and the future seemed promising. Then, the auditorium door opened, and to everyone's surprise, Emily Roberts entered. A murmur quickly spread among the employees present. The young woman, who had been fired after the incident, was now dressed simply but with a determined look. She walked towards the stage, and everyone watched her in silence. John felt a mix of emotions, but decided to keep an open mind. "I know many of you see me as the person who failed," Emily began, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. "But what I really am is someone who needs to change. My dismissal was a wake-up call. Call to become an advocate for inclusion in our bank and our community." The audience was visibly divided. Some still felt anger towards her, while others seemed surprised to hear her words. "When I looked at what I had done, I realized the prejudice I carried wasn't just mine, but something that had been cultivated in our culture for a long time. I didn't just fail, John, but all of you who work here and deserve a safe and welcoming environment," continued, her voice growing increasingly firm. John couldn't help but feel empathy. He stood up and gestured for her to look at him. "Emily, we all make mistakes. What matters now is how you choose to move forward. I also had to learn from the pain and turn it into something positive," said, his voice carrying a sincerity that resonated in the room. Michael seized the moment. "This is the essence of what we're trying to build here. It's not just about punishing mistakes, but about learning and growing together." Emily looked at John, visibly moved. "I want to apologize not just to you, but to everyone affected by my actions. I'm here to make amends, and if you give me a chance, I want to work to ensure no one ever goes through you went through." The room fell silent as John pondered her proposal. He knew that giving a second chance was a courageous choice, but he felt it could be the start of something bigger. "If you're willing to change, then I'm willing to support you. But we need to ensure that this isn't just a superficial change. We need policies that hold all employees accountable," stated, with determination. Michael smiled, pleased with John's proposal. "Let's work on new guidelines that ensure every employee is responsible for their actions, and that promote an environment of mutual respect. This is what we need." The meeting ended on a note of hope and renewal. John felt that, although the journey was long, a new chapter was forming. He became an active advocate for change, while Emily began her path of redemption. And together, they were ready to transform the bank's culture, and perhaps, the entire city of Greenfield. Besides his business success and the positive impact he had on the bank, John Anderson is also known for his community initiatives aimed at promoting inclusion and local economic development. One of John's main actions was the creation of the Greenfield Entrepreneurship Fund, an initiative designed to support small businesses and startups in the city. At the fund's launch event, held in a local auditorium, business owners, local authorities, and community members were present. John took the stage to speak, receiving warm applause. In his speech, he emphasized the importance of providing equal opportunities for everyone, regardless of their background or appearance. Several months later, the fund's impact was already visible. Small businesses that had received funding were thriving, creating jobs, and revitalizing the local economy. Sarah Thompson, the businesswoman who had witnessed the recognition moment at the bank, was one of the fund's beneficiaries. Her craft store, which had previously struggled to survive, was now flourishing thanks to the financial support and guidance provided by John. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, be sure to follow our channel and hit the like button. Stay tuned for more inspiring stories.